My name's Tony Coffey. I'm a member of the reunion committee. I'm here for my 55th glorious reunion, having a wonderful time, and I hope you all are as well. But I think the best thing is that I think of Mary Gordon as a friend, and that's very special. All of you must know who Mary Gordon is, or you wouldn't be sitting here. Mary is a Barnard graduate of the class of 1971 and loves and has always loved Barnard. And I think for somebody who loves Barnard to have the title of Millicent C. McIntosh Professor in English and Writing, that must be like a dream come true. Mary has hardly left Barnard, as she told Garrison Keillor on Prairie Home Companion not too long ago. And she has, but all this time she's been writing, and she's composed altogether, I think, 16 books, 10 works of fiction, both novels and collections of short stories, and 6 works of nonfiction. And if I tell you that 3 of her works of nonfiction include a memoir that deals mostly with her father, and a memoir that deals mostly with her mother, and a biography of Joan of Arc, that'll tell you a lot about Mary Gordon. So. The program for this session is that Mary is going to talk and read, and probably talk and read a little more, and then there will be time for questions. When we get to questions, Jim back here is going to be walking around with a wireless mic, and I will be pointing to him to tell him where to take the microphone. So I'm going to ask that when we get to that point, you raise your hand and wait to be called on, and then stand and use the mic so that everyone can hear. And it's going to be recorded as well, I'm pretty sure, since there's all this equipment here. So it is my huge pleasure to introduce you all Mary Gordon.
Can you all hear me? Yeah. This room, the thing about Barnard as a physical place is that it makes the past and the present flow into one another. So sometimes pleasurably, sometimes a bit alarmingly. There seems to be the same mirror on in front of the elevator on the 4th floor of Barnard Hall. And I'm still looking in it, but not seeing the same person. Or maybe I am seeing the same person, which is sort of the problem. And I think about this room where I took Introduction to Music with Hubert Doris. I think there weren't, am I fantasizing this? I don't think there were windows then. Doesn't this room seem like it was very dark? Or maybe that was just my state of mind at the time. Wasn't it? Yeah. Right, right. Right, so I'm right. I never know what I make up and what I don't make up. So I remember it as, and I remember Hubert Doris saying, Beethoven, the man who freed music, bah. And I thought, what does that mean? It gave me a tremendous sense of inferiority and anxiety, and I had to laugh, like, yeah. That's what they all say. The same thing with geology. When he told geology jokes, I had to laugh, and I didn't quite get the, quartz jokes, but I had to pretend to. I remember not being very good in geology. I had to take it as a science requirement, and the poor teacher really wanted to get non-science majors excited about science, so I wrote my essay on erosion with a quote from Yeats at the beginning, "Nothing can be sole or whole unless it has been rent." An essay on erosion. And he was so excited, and I felt so bad about it, because I really... And then I remember being in this room with Barbara Novak, taking American art, and it was just as she was kind of inventing the term luminism and telling us all to look at the Hudson River painters, which until she said that, everybody thought those are just things my grandmother has in her attic that we don't look at. And I remember being here when she kind of opened up that whole world. So So it's the past and the present flow in such a in and out of one another in such a dramatic way for me every day of my life. And one of the things that I want to tell you is that Barnard students are still wonderful. They may, I don't know, I think they're kind of wonderful in the same way that we were, except different too. And I think it's one of the reasons why when people say to me, doesn't your teaching interfere with your writing? It's exactly the opposite, because Barnard women give me so much hope. If you are a writer of, you know, what I have to call serious literary things, you can get very depressed and think, you know, the audience is shrinking, the audience is graying, the torch is going to go out with me. And then I come to my classes and 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds are excited by the same things that I was excited by when I was 18, 19, 20, 21. And I taught a class this semester on long story short novels and novellas, and I actually was moved to tears by some of my midterms. Now, usually people cry over midterms for different reasons. But I had these young people writing about Flaubert and Chekhov and Tolstoy, Thomas Mann, Catherine Ann Porter, Willa Cather, with passion and excitement. And it was like, you know, as thrilling to them as it was to me. And it's why I think Barnard is such a precious and special place, and why we need so much support, because we are an alternate universe and a superior universe. And one of the things that makes me sad about what's happened to thinking is that when I was here, I got here in '67, I left in '71. It was just the beginning of the women's movement. And one of the things that we thought was that we were going to change the world so that men would be more like women, so that values that were considered traditionally female would be treasured, and that was going to have to be a psychic revolution, that the female would be honored, and we would have to question whether the traditional male position was always the superior position. I still think we need to do that. What worries me is a sort of movement among feminists, and which is that if we can just be as horrible as men, but better at being horrible, then we will have made progress. That is to say, if we can be greedier and more aggressive, then the world will be a better place, because then there will be more women being greedy and aggressive. And so, you know, the table will be a little bit more balanced. But if, you know, what you're doing at the table is murderous, I don't think it's a step forward to have half the murderers be female. And I think that this is one of the things that Barnard does and can do, which is it forces the question, is the traditional male always the superior position, habit of mind? Is it not our responsibility to really change the habit of mind so that what would be considered traditionally female values and positions are treasured? Now, the trouble is, this doesn't connect very well with money. And because money is really in the hands of the greedy. And we need money to create this alternate universe. That's where I kind of keep hitting my head against a wall. But I think about the monastic tradition in Christianity. And what the monastic tradition originally did was it said, we're going to be another way of being Christian. We're not going to be what the Pope and the bishops, and we're going to do it another way. And somehow it's lasted since the 5th century in a way that was not so much about money and power, although they got corrupt. I'm not, you know, I've read my Chaucer. But it seems to me that what Barnard has to do is to be proud of our alternate vision and not try to conform it to a vision that does not reflect everything that has made us great. And it's one of the things that we need our alumni for, to remind us of that and to keep it going. So I've had these incredible students in the past years, and I want to share that with you, that it was really interesting. I taught at Stanford 2 years ago. I was a visiting professor there for a quarter, and so everybody thinks, oh, you know, much harder getting to Stanford than to Barnard. I'm sure the students are a lot better. I taught the same course that I had taught at Barnard, where, for example, I was teaching Catherine Ann Porter. I had to say, no more talking about Catherine Ann Porter. We're going to move on. Enough. No, but can't we just, this was my Barnard students, can't we just talk about Willa Cather some more? No, we have to move on. At Stanford, I taught exactly what I taught here, and the students said, this is too hard for us. And this was a quote from Stanford English majors. We don't like to have to work that hard at stuff that we read. My Barnard students were saying, can't you give us more? You know, what else can I read? What else can I do? And there was something about, I thought that was really a metaphor, that maybe on some kind of paper, kids who get into Stanford look jazzier than kids who get into Barnard, but it has nothing to do with reality. And this is the real reality. That's what I want to say. We're the reality. And we are a precious, somewhat fragile reality. But if we're not who we are, we might as well pack it in. We might as well have let Columbia take us. So remember, I came here in '67. I'm a 60s chick. What can I say? I didn't know what a hedge fund was until a couple years ago. When I was at Stanford, the person who paid my salary was a lovely, lovely man who had a hedge fund. And I was sitting next to him at dinner, and I said, you know, I don't usually get to sit next to people who own hedge funds, or whatever is the verb, own, have, manage, run, I don't know. So I said, but I like, you know, but you're really nice, and I like you, and you're very smart, so I need to ask you a question. I said, what's money? He said, what? And I said, what's the value of $1? I said, we have no gold standard, so what is $1 worth? And he said to me, it's worth whatever guys like me say it's worth. So I said to him, then you and I are in the same business, right? I said, I make stuff up, and they call it fiction. And you guys make stuff up, and you call it finance. But people believe you. But we're in the same profession, right? Can we admit that? And he said, you're right, but nobody can know that. So I think Barnard is here to remind us that finance and fiction are actually the same profession. However, we do need that stuff that hedge fund, whatever verb they use, make or pretend to make or invent, in order to create a world which makes possible a better world. So that Barnard women can leave here not trying to conform to a world that doesn't fit the values they were given, but can transform the world. We have to create generations of women who believe in transformation, or else things just get more and more hideous. And that's not good. And and our young women can do it. I just wish you could meet some of them. You would be so thrilled at the imagination, the intelligence, the energy, the goodness, the kindness, the humor, and they're just wonderful, and they're working really hard. I do worry about them. A lot of them just work so hard. I'm not sure that they have enough time to play, but that might be a function of this world. So because this is called Reunion, I want to read you something from a book that I just published in April, and it's called The Love of My Youth. And it's kind of appropriate for a reunion, because what it's about is, it's about two people who are nearly 60 at the beginning of the book, and they were lovers when they were teenagers, from age 15 to about age 21 or 22. And they have a traumatic breakup when they're 21 or 22. They haven't seen each other for nearly 40 years. They meet again in Rome because they have a mutual friend who has a business of renting out apartments to Americans. So they decide that they will see each other, and they go for walks. So she's in Rome for 3 weeks. She's an epidemiologist. He's a music teacher. They decide that they will meet, and they will go for one walk a day for 3 weeks, and they will see one beautiful thing a day, which is the way I like to go to Rome. Because I think one can't get overwhelmed. That I'm against being overwhelmed. And one of the reasons that I wanted to write this book is to look at the question, are we, as we age, the same people that we were when we were young, or not? And in what ways are we, in what ways are we not? That's a kind of central question of the book. And also, a question was, I wanted to examine what happened to the dreams, the imagination, particularly the political and social imagination that was ours when we came of age in the 60s. What happened to that? What happened to us? And one of the things that strikes me is that for those of us who are of my cohort, the way the world changed absolutely radically in a couple of years. And that when I came to Barnard, I was really not the person I was when I left Barnard, but in a much more radical way than I think has happened before or since. So I want to begin with talking about with reading a passage that happens in 1964, and then a passage when Adam and Miranda are in high school, and then a couple of years later when they go to college. She goes to Wellesley, he goes to Boston University. And one of their conflicts is that she's very political in the 60s, and he is trying to be a serious pianist. And the conflict of these ways of life in some ways forces them apart. But this is September 1964. Labor Day has come and gone. It is officially not summer, but the air is close and damp, the temperature in the high 80s. No one knows how to dress, or rather girls and women don't. Boys and men feel they have no choice. For most activities of any kind of public nature, a jacket is required. They are prepared, men and boys who aspire to the category of the respectable, to be too hot. But girls and women, having put aside their pastel dresses, are baffled, vexed. As long as they refuse white shoes, belts, and pocketbooks, they are perfectly within their rights to wear a skirt and long-sleeved blouse of a breathable material, cotton always the most desirable, but sometimes rejected on the basis of convenience in favor of nylon or dacron, drip dry. Whatever they choose, they too will be uncomfortable. Stockings are compulsory, and for all but the most brave, a girdle to hold in the stomach, whether or not the stomach requires being held in. Also, to keep the stockings up. But even if they are not too warm, the women and the girls will not be happy. They have spent many days in August sweating in try-on rooms, making important autumn purchases, wool skirts, straight A-line pleated, sweaters to match the colors of the falling leaves, purchases to suggest security, dependability, a preparedness against winter. Miranda, for example, is secretly disappointed because she spent a summer's worth of babysitting money on a jacket made to look like a lumberjack's, red and black plaid designed by Pendleton. It would be absurd to wear it on a day like this. She would sweat and worry at the odor of her own young body, still unfamiliar to her, producing new, unacceptable substances at a daily or alarming rate. She does not think of it as September 7th, 1964. She thinks of it as the first day of junior year in high school. 4 years later, September 7th, 1968, she won't consider wearing something uncomfortable. In 1968, she will wear what is easy or amusing. No one she speaks to at that time will be able to consider once again wearing stockings and a girdle, which will by that time have become as unthinkable as a whalebone corset, a bustle, or a parasol. Miranda and her friends will be proud of wearing garments that others have worn before them. They will hide any designer label, anything with a recognizable name. But of course, she doesn't know this. It is September 7th, 1964, the day she must audition for the Glee Club. This year, the Glee Club solos will be taken from Brigadoon. So with the part of her babysitting money left over from the Pendleton jacket, she buys the original Broadway cast album of the show. She chooses the original cast with people she's never heard of, instead of the recording accompanying the film with people she has heard of and likes very much, Gene Kelly and Sid Charisse, because she knows that Broadway is more important than Hollywood, and the original cast is always the best. How does she know this? It's one of the things she and her friends seem to know, which allows them to mark themselves as superior to others of their cohort who are considered superior, cheerleaders, athletes, but they don't know this kind of thing. In her room with the doors closed, when she's sure her father is at work and her mother is out shopping and her brother is practicing with one of his teams, she sings the words to the song, "The Heather on the Hill, Come to Me, Bend to Me." She's embarrassed at her own yearning to sing these songs to a living person. Come to me, bend to me, kiss me good day, give me your lips and don't take them away. She has not yet been kissed. At night in her bed, she dreams of it. Her arms around a boy's strong body, his arms around her, to be allowed to allow whatever will be bound to happen. The music of Brigadoon is not the kind of music she believes in. She believes in folk music. She wishes the solo were going to be It Ain't Me, Babe, or The Times They Are A-Changin', or a song that evokes the great emotions of simple people, Long Black Veil or Silver Dagger. But when she wakes from sleep, the words on the screen between her sleeping and her wakefulness are, "Give me your lips and don't take them away." So she tries out for the Glee Club, and Adam is accompanying them. They're very young, Adam and Miranda. She's 16, he will be 16 in 2 weeks. They never say to themselves, "We are very young. Most of our lives have yet to be lived." They fear, they hope, and they believe. They think, "I will travel to many places. I will never go anywhere. I will have a great many loves. No one will ever love me. The world will be better for my having lived in it. Nothing I do will come to anything. I will make music of unthought of purity. I am a fraud and will soon be exposed for the fraud I am. I will be renowned, applauded on the world's great stages. I will end up selling furniture like my father in White Plains. I will be the wife of a great man, will be the mother of many children who surround me with incalculable love. I will marry a man as my mother did, who forgets that he once loved me." Of the things they do not fear or do not think of fearing, fortunate children, spared what others alive when they are alive have not been spared, what most of the human race has not, physical illness, plague, bodily weakness. No, these are not their fears. Their fears are of the Earth's annihilation by the atom bomb, the mushroom cloud, the threat of which inspires their teachers to send them under their desks for weekly air raid drills. The end of the world, the end of the world, the end of the world, the end of the world is a phrase that often spins in their minds, and they're terrified even when they forget that they're terrified. They know quite well what it will mean, the complete disintegration of their flesh and bones, the turning to ash in an instant of everything they love. And close at hand, like an aunt or uncle living in the next town, the memories of the war, the concentration camps, the words still whispered to themselves at night when sleep refuses, gas chamber, SS, Hitler, death to the Jews. So these two children, only recently no longer children, Adam and Miranda, are 16 and about to be 16. Miranda will not allow her mother to give her a sweet 16 party. Her mother is disappointed, but she will not press the point. So Miranda tries out for the Glee Club, and she has a crush on Adam, but she doesn't quite know how to make it happen. But they have to plan. Her girlfriends have to plan for her audition. For weeks and weeks, Miranda and her four friends have dedicated themselves to the question, what should Miranda choose for her audition piece? The conditions are many. They are extensively discussed. There is the matter of the personalities, the judges of the competition. The judges will be Miss McKeever, who gets teary over almost everything, and most important, Mr. Jamison, the senior music teacher, director of the Glee Club, called Jamie by the girls who swoon over him in small, semi-private groups. They love his black-rimmed glasses, his sand-colored hair, long enough to fall into his eyes and be pushed impatiently back by graceful hands that always seem to be quite tan, whatever the season. He was the first to appear in school in a madras jacket worn over a yellow shirt, something the girls had not seen in life, but only in the pages of 17 magazine. It would not occur to him that Charles Jameson has a lover with whom he lives in Greenwich Village, whose name is not Harriet, but Harry. Such a category has not entered the group mind. Therefore, all the girls in the Thomas Arnold Glee Club can still put themselves to sleep with dreams of their June wedding the week after college graduation to Charles Jameson. They speculate endlessly on the details of his temporary bachelorhood. They decide he's involved with a Martha Graham dancer, or perhaps someone who works in advertising or publishing, or perhaps someone European, Spanish, they decide, or Portuguese. They worry. Charles Jameson's tastes are unpredictable. And there is the painful reality that juniors are never given solos, and the dreaded Suzanne Lazard, who signs her notes written to Mr. Jameson and senior boys, but never to girls, Susie, S-U-Z-Z-I. Her mother is rumored to buy her clothes in Paris. Her father provides Susie with voice lessons from Miss Patty Richards, who was in the chorus of Damn Yankees, and who has told everybody that she and Gwen Verdon are very, very close. Like sisters, Miss Patty Richardson says, twining her middle fingers like this. A third problem, the girls don't know whether to honor or to discourage Miranda's obsession with Joan Baez. A trip to the city is required to select sheet music so that they're sure they haven't wasted their time. They take the train to the city. Adam is on the train. They greet him politely, but he blushes when he sees them and ducks his head. As if their greeting were a heavy rain he must escape. He enters another car. Do you think he's cute? Who? Adam. He's really shy. I think he's kind of a snob. Takes these special piano lessons. He's going to be accompanist of the Glee Club. We'll get to know him. Yeah. Miranda and her friends go to Colony Records on Broadway. They find something called the Joan Baez Songbook, which has on its cover a picture of the singer on a beach in California called Big Sur. They plan to travel there after high school graduation. They're hoping that one of their parents will lend them a car. They buy a book. They look over it on the train. They look over at Miranda's bedroom. They settle on Plaisir d'amour, sung first in French. But suppose Susie chooses a French song. This is considered, then rejected. They know their enemy. They know that her imagination is set not on Paris, but on London, where the Beatles live. She has had her hair cut in the short geometric style invented by Vidal Sassoon, and she paints her eyelids with a single thick black stroke. They're right. Susie doesn't choose a French song, she chooses a song by an English singer, Dusty Springfield. You don't have to say you love me, just be close at hand. They don't know that she means it as a message to Mr. Jameson. Susie has miscalculated. Singing her modern song with her modern haircut and her short modern skirt, she represents for Charles Jameson all that he would like in the female kept back. Miranda, her light brown hair unstyled, reaching below her shoulders, her flower print villager shirtwaist dress, her simple song of heartfelt love and its potential sorrows has touched in Charles Jameson exactly the right note. Miranda's eyes fall on the boy seated at the piano, on Adam, whom she looks at briefly and then looks away from. She thinks he's beautiful. She has never in her life, though she's read of it in books, seen hair like his, so black. It seems shot through with blue, and she thinks, black, black, black is the color of my true love's hair, which Joan Baez has sung night after night in the darkness in Miranda's bedroom. She wants to refuse the word beautiful because beautiful is not a word used for boys in these years. Yet it returns like a wave over a slick shoreline. Beautiful, she thinks. He is beautiful. And she thinks of this boy whose name, Adam, is the only thing she knows about him. Their eyes meet and they both blush. She looks not at his face but at his beautiful hands, the traces of dark hair that makes him so entirely ungirlish. So she has to try to get him to notice her. Although she thinks of herself as a modern girl, free of the constraints that she believes hobbled her mother and her mother's generation, she would find it unthinkable to ask a boy out on a date. And she has never been on a date before, so the whole notion of date shimmers in the distance, desirable, unattainable, the island of the blessed, Mount Rushmore, Shangri-La. So a few weeks later, she pretends to just happen to be on the same train with him to New York. She knows which train he takes into the city every week. For 3 weeks, they have been in the same room 3 afternoons a week, and they have yet to exchange a word. When Adams sees her on a train, he finds himself strangled with anxiety because he has found her beautiful, her hair like a cool stream down her back. He would like to bury his hot face in it, and her careful, sensible, but supple hands, and her voice singing the joy of love. So when she says, "Oh, hi, guess what? We're on the same train," he can't think of anything to reply. "I'm going to the Museum of Modern Art," she says casually. "I'm really interested in Monet. My mother has this book about him, and I thought maybe I'd ask Mrs. Lucas if I could do a term paper on the French Impressionists or history. It's a little weird, I know, but you know, she's easygoing." She made that up a second before. She's never been to the Museum of Modern Art. She only goes to the Metropolitan with her mother. But her mother won't let her visit the Impressionists. And she's in a panic because she doesn't know where the Museum of Modern Art is. Nor does he. He has never done anything in the city but go to his lessons and then get back on the train. "That's great," he says. So she spends the entire day in Grand Central's terminal, her eye on every Westchester train so she can pretend to just happen to be on the same one. He gets on a train 3 hours later. "How is the museum?" She panics. She hadn't thought that she would have to tell this lie, and she thinks she's been really stupid. "Nice," she says, "really, really nice." "How was your lesson?" "Oh, good. I have a really great teacher." They talk on the train. "I'll see you in school," he says as they part. "Yes," she says, drenched in failure. But they have talked to each other, and the next weekend she gets on the train again and says, "I'm going back to the museum." And he says, "Oh, maybe I could meet you there after my lesson." And she says, "Oh, great." And they're both frightened because they still don't know where the museum is. But they find it, and they look at Monet's water lilies and Matisse's swimming pool and Picasso's Guernica and his goat. She chatters and feels like a fool, and he is nearly mute and feels like a fool. And they go back on the train and say, "See you in school." And then there is the dance, his first, which he goes to only so that he could dance with her. And he smells her hair, so clean and promising, so exciting and reassuring. And 2 weeks later, the unthinkable, he asks her to the movies. Zorba the Greek. So this is when they are in college 3 years later, and she wants him to go to the Pentagon March with her. And he doesn't want to go. She knows he doesn't want to go and that it's difficult for him to tell her. The march on the Pentagon, the biggest anti-war demonstration ever planned. The government will have to understand that they're wrong to be in Vietnam. The war will have to end. Miranda and her friends have been planning for it, negotiating with bus companies, attending training sessions, what to do if you're tear-gassed, if the cops approach you intending to beat you up. Miranda's father doesn't believe that any policeman would think of harming his daughter. He would not, however, have dreamed that his daughter, in blue jeans and a work shirt, a bandana around her neck, would be carrying in her knapsack bottles of water and tubes of Vaseline. Smear the Vaseline on your face, then douse the bandana and cover your face in case of tear gas. Small bottles of iodine to teach potential wounds. He would never have dreamed that his daughter would be a demonstrator, that she could imagine she had anything to fear from the police. He had raised her to be a lady like her mother. And now she was shouting phrases that were ridiculous to him. Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? There is not, she believes, anything more important than stopping the war. When she arrived in Wellesley a little more than a year before, she did not know she would be thinking this. She thought the most important thing was choosing the right classes for her first semester. Would she study Russian or continue with French? Would she do her science requirement in freshman year? What would her roommate think of her new blanket, which she and her mother had shopped for and which she loved? By 1967, the weather has changed. It is no longer early spring. It is high noon. The sun falls like a blade on everything, shedding its over-clear light. Everything is as clear as it can be, or it is entirely invisible, entirely incomprehensible to sight and understanding. So if it is not high noon, it is black midnight, it is the land of death and darkness, or it is the land of unprecedented hope and transformation, but it is not the land of their birth. Only a year earlier, when they were both leaving home for college, it seemed everything would be quite easy. From the day she moves in to the dorm, Miranda knows that she's lucky in her roommate, Valerie, from a small town outside Omaha. Miranda's arriving in college with a boyfriend gives her a great cachet. There are what are called parietal hours, 2 hours on Sunday when boys are allowed in dormitory rooms. Quite early on, Miranda confided her sexual status to Valerie, who was honored to leave the room for 2 hours on Sundays. Miranda makes a new friend every week. Her closest friends live on the same dormitory floor. Lydia from California, who likes geology, and Renee from Philadelphia, who urges Miranda to take Russian, and Marion from Chicago, who's one of the first to major in African studies. They think Adam is wonderful. His distance from contemporary culture makes him seem precious. They tease him about his ignorance of rock and roll. When he says some of it is very good, the Beatles, for example, some of their harmonies are quite complex. Oh, for God's sake, Adam, Renee says, and laughs that laugh that makes everyone want to be standing next to her. Saying the Beatles are interesting is like saying ice cream is interesting. Maybe it is, yeah, but you know, there's cream, there's sugar, there's ice, and the machines that make it, but in the end, it's just fucking fabulous, and you're glad it's in the world. Everyone suddenly seems to be saying fuck, using the adjective fucking in the easy, habitual way they said groovy 2 years before. What happened? How did it darken? Was it that the world was getting darker in those days, a daily darkening, a cloudy thickening? Miranda volunteers for draft counseling, the sister of her brother, how can she not? She helps boys to relocate to Canada. She directs them to psychiatrists who will swear they are psychologically unfit for battle. that they'll bring danger to their fellow soldiers. For a time, Miranda moves in a well-meaning pastel-colored clutch of colleagues and companions, Quakers, Unitarians, left-wing Catholics, and Jews whose parents had voted for Adlai Stevenson. She sings in the dormitory lounge the songs of Peter, Paul, and Mary. The edgiest lyrics that come out of her mouth are "Accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone, for the times they are a-changin'." But then, did it happen because the music changed, that Dylan became ironic, angry, and the Beatles moved from vaudeville to LSD? And then there are no more parietal hours. The young women will no longer accept that there should be, that they should be told when men are or not allowed into their rooms. And so they are allowed more and more, and suddenly there are male voices in the hall, male presences in the dining room. Renee experiments with drugs because of her new boyfriend, Arnold, who is from Florida. 2 weekends into the second semester of sophomore year, Marion decides she no longer wants to be friends with Miranda and Lydia and Renee and Valerie. She doesn't want to live in the same hall with them, although they'd gone to great trouble to assure her that they'd all be together. She's put off because they're so uncomfortable with her boyfriend, Roger, who has hair unlike any they have ever known. It's called an afro, Marion tells them. And Roger is silent and sullen and makes no attempt to engage the girls in conversation. He disappears for long periods and then is suddenly there. He's not a student. They don't know exactly what he does. They fear that their anxiety is racially motivated and they try to conceal it, but even with Renee, who is the most relaxed, the tension is clearly there. Some of the groups which Miranda is involved with have given up an unequivocal commitment to nonviolence. Adam does, in the end, go with Miranda on the march on the Pentagon. He sits with her on the bus, but what he does at the march isn't enough for her, and they both know it. He's uncomfortable. She knows he's worried about his hands. He's too shy to shout out slogans, and he can't bring himself to walk in silence with two middle fingers formed into a V. He knows that she's grateful to him for going. He knows, too, that for the first time, she considers the possibility that she might wish he were other than what he is. Thanks. I'm happy to take any questions. Tony, do you want to be my facilitator?
Jim? Hans? There's a start there.
Hi, thank you. I'm curious about whether you studied writing at Barnard and who was here when you were here. Who was teaching?
My first and actually most wonderful writing teacher was Janice Thaddeus, and I actually studied poetry with her. And then I studied with Elizabeth Hardwick, who was exciting and thrilling, but not a very good teacher, but thrilling. So it was actually, there were two very different kinds of teachers. Jan Thaddeus was very careful and attentive, and Elizabeth was just the white tornado. So there were two very different experiences of writing.
Hi, I'm not a writer. It seems to me you set yourself a really difficult task of being in a perspective where you know, you're talking about something happening at a certain time, then you're going back from that time and then forward, all in the same segment. And
yeah.
How do you do that?
The way athletes always say defense, defense, defense. I think for writers it's revision, revision, revision. It's a matter of cutting it up, it's almost rhythmic for me, making sure the balance is right and that there are connections and I'm not leaving these big gaps that people will fall through. But that's really, it's a really good question because that's the tough thing where you have to keep doing it over and over again to make sure it fits together, almost like a piece of music, I think.
Right there.
Why did you choose Wellesley and Boston University instead of Barnard and Juilliard?
Why did I choose Wellesley? Well, I didn't want to choose Barnard just because I would have felt I would have had to be true to history and actually name people, or it wouldn't have been, I mean, I couldn't make up a fake Barnard, but I didn't know anybody at Wellesley, so I could make up a fake Wellesley. And also, I had written so much about, they had to really be far enough away from home. And they both lived in Westchester. They couldn't be going home every weekend. So I had to get them out of, that's what's great about being a fiction writer. You want to get people out of town, you just move them. Whereas in life, you can't say, you've been in New York too long, so now I'm relocating you to Boston. But in fiction, you can say, they need to be in this place for a particular reason. I've written about Barnard as nonfiction. I couldn't do it as fiction because then it wouldn't be Barnard, and I can't mix in that way. Down here.
Regarding your comment on the seeming incompatibility between feminine values and money, I would offer someone I consider an amazing trailblazer, and that is Oprah Winfrey. And if you haven't seen her master class that's on her cable television, talking about her values and her spirituality, I say she is the outstanding feminist leader of our past century.
I think you're completely right, but she didn't make her money in a traditional male way. She really did it her own way, and oddly enough, it was all about women. Women are her audience, and I, if there are 5 men in the world that watch Oprah, I'd be surprised. And I take your point. I think you're completely right. She's doing it a new way. Now, whether there can be other Oprahs, one only has to hope. But you're absolutely right.
Okay.
She invented him too, though, didn't she? Yeah. But we have to think, not in the traditional ways. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you experience writing this novel as if you were a protagonist in this novel? Because you lived through the period you're describing.
The characters were very different from me, but of course I got to do the Joan Baez memories again and the villager dresses and the, and so yeah, of course I did. I called on all my own memories and my memories of, it's amazing to me how uncomfortable we all were in our clothes for such a long time. And to me, that was one of the great liberations, that suddenly you could be comfortable in your clothes. I remember that so clear. We were wearing panty girdles when we were 15. Whose brain thought of that? And then suddenly you weren't, and it was a miracle, So I remembered that, physical memory is always a great help to me. So I could really call up the memory of being uncomfortable and then comfortable. And to me, that was a kind of an embodied metaphor for what happened.
Yes. Do you think that there is a literary establishment today, and how would you characterize it?
It's a good question. There's a literary establishment that thinks it's at the center of the web, but only it thinks it's at the center of the web. So I would say the New Yorker, the New York Review of Books, the New York Times Book Review, the kind of high-end publishers who gets to say what's published and how much money it makes. Yeah, there is. What gets reviewed, what doesn't get reviewed, those are all decisions made by, I don't think they, have a newsletter, but. It's just bad for my mental health to think about it. I really have to, I have to discipline myself to not think about it, because at the end of the day, it's not that important, but you can get very obsessional about it. So for me, it's a great discipline to just say, live and be well, but I'm, going to do my thing. But it's hard.
Can you say some more about the two teachers that you had, their different styles, and what it gave you, and kind of your journey from there?
Well, Jen Thaddeus was an amazing influence on my life. She was, I was a poet mainly when I was here. And she was so careful and attentive, and she would read my things very, very carefully and urge me in very specific ways and urge me to read things I hadn't thought of, but was very, she paid a lot of attention to what was actually on the page. Now with Elizabeth Hardwick, and Liz Benedict will back me up on this, I think, it was like, you know, she was actually being divorced from Robert Lowell when I took her class, and so she would bring these amazing people into class, and she really, in a way that I would never do as a teacher, she really like singled me out in the class and would just read my things and say, well, only Mary wrote anything good this week. And I'd say, oh, dear God, they're going to kill me in the dorm. She made no attempt to be fair. She actually didn't pay that much attention to what people wrote. But then she would say to me, would you like to go out to a play and then we'll meet Sam Shepard afterward? And I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And so she kind of made me feel that I could take a place in, as you say, this larger literary world, and that I had a right to it. And that was kind of wonderful. And then she would very casually mention some obscure Russian essayist whom I would meet, and it would blow my mind. But it was a very, very different kind of teaching and relationship.
Hi, you may already know this, but you know that there is actually a reference book called Feminists Who Changed America, which had its book party here. And actually, they said at the book party that the college that had the most women in the reference section was Barnard.
Yeah.
And I just would mention along with that, do you know group VIDA? It's a group of women academics who are working to combat sexism in...
I don't, but thank you for that. That's great.
And also just that I, take exception to the suggestion that feminists are trying to be like cutthroat men. I think maybe some, but being somewhat in the midst of it all, I could say that that is not true.
No, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yeah. I don't think feminists are. I just think, for example, the women who say, I'm not a feminist, but... And they think the way to move women forward, I misspoke if I said that, I don't think feminists are doing it. But there is a branch of somewhat younger women who might still call themselves feminists that, I just heard a discussion last week about somebody saying, we need more, women CEOs, we need more, who was saying it? That women aren't aggressive enough, that they care too much about personal relationships, and that will hold them back. Somebody was just saying this. Oh, it was at Barnard graduation. What? Yeah. Jill Sandberg, the CEO of Facebook. I think, and she certainly would consider herself a feminist, but she kept saying, lean into it, and you have to be, and she talked about the ambition gap and how women have stood in their own way by caring about personal relationships, which is possibly true, but what's the alternative to that? Not caring about personal relationships? So I think that's something that got put in my brain that alarmed me a little bit. And she would certainly consider herself a feminist.
Hi. I'm Sarah Stern, a class of '86, and I just really loved your book, The Shadow Man. And I was so, I know it was mostly about your father, but the passages about your mother were so beautiful. And I wonder if you could just talk about the book a little bit.
Well, yeah, it was about my search to discover what the reality of my father's life was, which had been really a tissue of lies. And then I wrote another book about my mother as well, called Circling My Mother.
In that other book.
Yeah. So at the time that I was trying to find out about my father, my mother was suffering from Alzheimer's and had completely lost memory. So there was no way that I could go to her to share or to check any of the details. So that made it really complicated.
Okay. Hi. I want to thank you for your work and what you've said today. But when I was going out on maternity leave and you knew I was writing, you encouraged me to keep writing, to not wait till after the kids were so old. My daughter's 2 now, and I didn't keep to my word. I haven't been writing. But I'm wondering from you if you could speak a little bit about how one re-engages in writing when you've stopped for a while. I don't know if you've gone through periods of rest, and how you got through parenting and writing.
I don't do rest. I'm having to learn how to rest now. You know what I would say? Just start small. If you say, I'm going to write for 3 hours, or I'm going to write 5 pages, you're going to feel overwhelmed. Say, and trick yourself, say, I will only allow myself half an hour. And I will only allow myself 1 page. And then you'll feel rebellious against yourself if you do it a little bit longer. But do it very, very small. And I would not set a product goal for myself. I would set a time goal for myself. So just say, I'm doing half an hour today. And if half an hour means I'm reading 1 page and I know what it is. I've been with my 2-year-old. I have no brain. My brain is mush. It's going to take me half an hour to read this 1 page. That's what your half-hour work is. But I think if you set the time or the space or the product too large, you'll feel defeated. So do it small, trick yourself. Tolstoy, when you think of the word babysitter connected to Tolstoy, it kind of gives you a headache, but Tolstoy actually had to babysit for his younger siblings. And to entertain them, he said to them, okay, we're all going to write a story. It can't have a white bear in it. No matter what you do, the story cannot have a white bear in it. They all immediately wrote stories about white bears. So I think sometimes you have to trick your mind and say, no matter what's happening, I'm only doing half an hour today. But do it small. And be patient with yourself. You know, if you were going back to exercising, after you had a baby, you wouldn't say, now I'm doing the marathon today. We would know better than that physically, and our minds are the same way, I think.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much as a non-Barnard alum, because it's a gender discrimination issue. But as a non-Barnard alum who actually has done a little writing from time to time, has watched Oprah many times, and enjoys her and thinks a lot of her. First of all, thank you for you're a fantastic writer. Thank you for your words, and you're a fantastic speaker, and that's great. And it's very appreciated. I think that you've touched on, especially in your early comments, on so many real thoughtful truths in such a diplomatic way about Barnard that, you know, from your travels, observations, whatever, there's great truths about things, and you hear people speak about it, the gem that it is. And a lot of times people talk about, well, geography, it's this nice campus in the middle of this city, and
we don't have a lot of time. Can you have a question?
Sure. I just appreciated, actually it wasn't, I just appreciate what you said about the students, about the women, when you were other places. And I think the focus, part of the problem is when people talk about it and the focus isn't on the women who are attending.
Thank you. Dorothy's down here. She's got a loud enough voice to carry around.
I had a question here.
Stand up and shout.
I have inside information that you are perhaps one of the most gifted teachers here at the college. Students love your classes, and you can take a lecture and create a discussion. Is your teaching something that you do that's separate and in tension with finding the time to write, or does one in some way nourish the other? I mean, part of me is in awe, and I just don't know how you do it all, but I am interested in the relationship between your teaching life and your writing.
Well, one of the things in a very practical way, if you have to get up in a big room like this and talk about a text for an hour and a half, you have to have read it really carefully. And I'm not smart enough to, I mean, Edward Said once said to me, you really read the things every time? And he said to me, you'll get over that. I haven't got over it. I read everything again, and so it's a process of reading and rereading that has actually borne a lot of fruit in my writing. I don't know. I come from a cohort of very energetic women. When I think of what my grandmother did, what I do is pretty pathetic. So I just feel like we had a lot of energy. And when I'm very good at compartmentalizing things. You know, when I'm doing one thing, that's what I'm doing. And, you know, as I'm trying to finish something, my husband will say to me, can you do that? I say, I'm not doing the checkbook now. You know, don't ask me about that. I don't care that we're going to jail tomorrow. I have to prepare this lecture. And I'm very strict about when I'm doing one thing, that's what I'm doing. And I don't let stuff bleed into the other areas. And I think that counts with, you know, mothering and writing too. You have to be where you are, when you are, and you can't be in another place.
I'm also, excuse me, I'm also from the class of '71, although we didn't know each other. And my question has to do with the '68 student strike, which for many of us, not all of us, of course, I've learned at the reunions, was utterly formative. The '68 strike was utterly formative, structured who and what we were. And so I'm interested in your participation then, what you thought of it then, and what you think of it now.
Well, I had this bizarre relationship to the strike because I was a commuter. But I was involved in the strike. I thought clearly it's the most important thing in the world. That they're talking about things that are much more important. So I would, you know, be in Hamilton Hall, jump out the window and get on the subway and say, hi, Mom, how was your day? Great. And so it was I would go home to a bunch of people, and my next door neighbors were in Vietnam. And all day I was protesting the war in Vietnam and thinking that it was really insane. And so it was a very enlightening but crazy-making and painful time for me. But it seemed clear to me that business as usual could not go on, and that you had to say this is evil. Sometimes you have to disrupt things, and so it was very transformative. I mean, I'd come from Catholic school the year before, where we had to stand next to our desks and say the Hail Mary before every class, and then I was jumping out of windows in Hamilton Hall a year later. So it was pretty mind-blowing, to say the least.
Way back.
You know, rudely stick your hands up once in a while a little bit so I can tell where the questions are coming from.
Thank you. I wonder if you would like to say a few more words about writing a memoir, the joys, the trials, the challenges, any suggestions for people who might like to start on a project like that?
I think the reason why I felt free to write a memoir was I wanted to say it's not just about me, it's about a way of life that has disappeared. So I liked to tell myself, although you might say it was self-deceived, that I was really preserving not just my experience, but an experience that was representative. And because I felt I was doing that, I felt more free to write about it. It's very painful. I think that if you're going to write a memoir, you have to tell the truth. You can't make stuff up. And not everybody thinks that. And one of the things that's painful is that you don't know whether you're remembering things correctly or not. That's really painful. I think the best you can do is say, at those moments when you're not sure, I think I remember this, I'm not sure. And then one of the painful things is when you remembered something and you thought you were telling the truth in good faith, and somebody says, no, it wasn't like that at all. That's kind of painful too. Then there are the issues, what do you get to disclose about the lives of other people? I really waited till everybody was dead that could be. I did not have them killed, but but I really waited till everybody that I was going to spill the beans on was dead. Now, some of their children then got mad at me, so it could go on forever. But I don't think you have the right to out somebody, and I don't just mean sexually, if they really don't want to be outed. So I think there are real ethical issues to memoir that you obviously don't have with fiction. But I think if you want, again, like the Barnard question, you know, if I wanted to write about Barnard, I'd write about Barnard. And if I wanted to make something up, I wouldn't call it Barnard. So I think in some ways memoir is the same as fiction in that you're always, you know, Grace Paley said if you were a horse, you'd write as a horse. And so you're always the same writer. You always have the same sensibility. You have the same habit of mind. You're always shaping things. But the question is, what really happened that you can change, and how then that fits in with the shaping process and that kind of musicality. So on the one hand, it's not scary like fiction because you don't have to make stuff up. But it's scary because you're not making it up. So it's complicated.
Hi, I'm also a member of the class of '71, and hi, Mary. And I have a question about raising children, and I know you dealt with some of these things in Pearl, but because it was such a tumultuous time and we changed so much, as I watched my own children grow up, and they're all mostly launched, they didn't go through, or they didn't share with me, all of that, all the angst, all the rebelliousness, the mischief.
Who were your children?
Maybe they kept it a secret. I'm sure they kept it a secret. Actually,
mine didn't keep it a secret. That was the bad part. Don't tell me, I wanted to say. Just lie to me. I don't want to know too much information.
All right, good. Well, that's good to know.
No, so I had one. They didn't. One of mine had his own form of rebellion. One of mine thinks I'm a wimp feminist. I'm not feminist enough. I wear makeup. I wear heels. You know, I shave my legs, which proves that I'm a tool of the patriarchy. But on the other hand, you know, she's perfectly happy for me to be her domestic servant to her and her baby. So they had their own things. What they didn't have was a sense that everybody was going through the same thing at the same time like we had. There were so many different ways of their finding their own paths, and it was not like one generational journey. And I think that's what they missed. There were a lot of splits. They're less hopeful than we were. They're much less hopeful, and that makes me sad. And maybe they're right, because we didn't do such a good job in changing the world as we thought we did. So that makes me sad. I think the world is a smaller, more dangerous place than it was when we were young, and that has consequences for what they think they can do. And I mean, we partly thought we could do stuff because we didn't know better, and they know better, and that makes them a different breed of cat, I think.
I think this is going to be the next to last question. The gentleman down here is last.
Hi, people are interested in Mary's experience at Barnard. She has written about this in an essay, in a book that is for sale at 3:30 a book called Mentors, Muses, and Monsters, which I edited. And Mary has written about her being a writer at Barnard and about her life at Barnard when she was there. So I just want to encourage people to look at that. And I also just want to, this is not about what you said, but I do think it's hilarious that the CEO of Facebook is condemning women for not caring enough about human relationships.
No, for caring too much.
For caring too much. No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
About the condemning, because that's what Facebook is all about.
If you call that a human relationship.
Right. No, but I mean, that's what they say it's all about. Isn't that hilarious? She sort of missed it. Anyway, thanks.
Gentleman down here, I'm sorry to say the last one.
DS nightfall. What is to be done?
Changes medication. I mean, so stupid. V.S. Naipaul said there has never been a great woman writer. There are no women writers that can equal him. Jane Austen was just sentimental tosh. It's so stupid that you don't, I mean, I just want to say, what's your problem? And, you know, it's like a 2-year-old having a tantrum. The best thing to do is not pay attention to it. You know, ridiculous.
I think we all agree with that one. Okay, thank you, Mary, so much.